Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us again. And just to kind of set the scene, thank you everybody for joining us. Today's Appinio and Bulk, we're going to be talking about shifting the mindset. So the journey to consumer-led product innovation and the road to a top 10 product. In terms of setting the scene, Ollie and I were at Quirks last week. We spoke for half an hour. There's a fascinating conversation. And we received quite a lot of feedback in terms of, look, it's a packed day, Quirks was sold out, we weren't able to make your session, has it been recorded? And equally, folks that weren't able to get to Quirks at all were wondering whether to ask us the same questions. So we thought, you know what? While it is all front of mind, let's sit down, record it, and pass on the webinar for those that weren't able to join. So here we are today. So I'll kick off with a quick introduction from my side, pass to Ollie, and then we can kind of get into the detail of it. My name is Mark Tomkinson. I lead the customer team here at Appinio. I've been with the business for 18 months. Conscious there's some folks that might know Bulk, but might not know Appinio. So we're a research technology business that offers an agile quant approach. We're designed to ensure your consumers are in every conversation. So be that from the tactical all the way through to kind of the strategic work. We have research methodologies to fit. We think of our business in kind of three core ways. Firstly, the people. So we've access to research consultants, over 100 research consultants that are there to be an extension of your team when you're looking to run research. Again, it can be from simple day-to-day pieces with fast turnarounds, the tactical pieces, all the way up to kind of the transformational bits of work that we are equally delighted to work on. We own our own panels, so we have panels around the world. Super important point given the kind of data security conversations that we saw over Quirks is front of mind in a lot of presentations. So it's brilliant that we've kind of future-proofed as a business on that point. And then I guess finally the platform itself, so being able to offer out an intuitive means with which to surface insights. It means that experienced marketers, experienced researchers, but also those that have been in the industry as long are able to kind of cut to the chase and get to sort of, I guess, what we call the aha moments, the moments that move the needle. And wrapped around all of that is our AI offering. So Ollie and I were talking about one of the cool functionality improvements we've had here at Appinio is the ability to crunch huge sets of data across brand tracking and pull out executive summaries immediately, something that's saved Ollie a load of time and a lot of our clients a lot of time. So that's Appinio. Ollie, over to you with Bulk.
My name's Ollie. I've been at Bulk for almost 2 years now. Time flies. And I head up their consumer and marketing insights team. It wasn't a team really when I joined. It was a bit of a more haphazard function with everyone kind of chipping in a little bit. They formalized that function, as I said, about 2 years ago. And it's been an incredible journey since then that Appinio has been a really integral part of. Before that, I worked in the US. I worked for a telecommunications company doing similar types of market consumer research stuff. But yeah, really excited to talk today about the Bulk experience and about how our kind of consumer centrism approach has really started to bear fruit from a product line perspective.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ollie. So take us back to the beginning. You joined Bulk 2 years ago to lead audience insights. Maybe you can start with kind of what the landscape looked like, what were you prioritizing, and maybe what sparked the decision to start working with Appinio?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bulk is a founder-led business still. It's about 18 or 19 years old, 18 years old, because we had our 18th birthday bouncer edition party last year. Yeah, as I said, founder-led business, and it is a really fantastic business from a product perspective, from a consumer alignment perspective. We have a ton of really amazing offerings for our consumers, but those consumers are really difficult to come by. They're really difficult to access and to retain. It's a super complicated customer journey with a pretty significant barrier to entry in that, you know, sports nutrition is kind of contingent on you getting up and going to the gym. Sorry about that one, Mark. And when you do, you know, get someone to go to the gym and be interested in sports nutrition, it's an absolute dogfight in the marketplace. And there are new competitors, new entrants all the time. And we are really kind of, you're fighting every single day to retain these customers at scale. So Bulk's main kind of channel for growth was growth by addition. And that has led to a catalog with over 1,400 SKUs. There were some gasps in the room at Quirks when we talked about that.
It's a big number. It is a big number.
Especially for a direct-to-consumer business.
Yeah.
And when I joined, there was this desire, this kind of necessity to start thinking about becoming a more consumer-led business rather than a product and an addition-led business. So everyone knows about how CPAs are never going to get any lower than they are today. Again, I talked a little bit about the new entrants and the competition in the space. And so we needed to kind of, as the name of this webinar suggests, shift the mindset and grow with a little bit more intentionality. And the way that we wanted to start that journey was figuring out where we were. And that involved standing up an initial brand tracking effort. We searched the marketplace and landed on Appinio as the partner that was going to help us do that. And that was really the springboard that we have used to kickstart our consumer research journey. I talked a little bit earlier about how fragmented the customer journey is. In a piece of research that we did with Appinio, we found out that the average consumer is what we call a repertoire consumer. So they buy from about 4 to 5 different brands every quarter. And that can be, picking up a grenade bar from the Sainsbury's checkout. That can be buying from Bulk direct to consumer. That can be, picking up the latest MyProtein shake in Tesco's. There are so many different customer touch points that as a direct-to-consumer business, using our own customer data, using our proprietary database data doesn't really work because you have no visibility on what the entire journey looks like. And that was the shift that we had to make, is we need to start thinking a little bit more about the entire journey and not just people's journey with Bulk. So that was the introduction and the kind of necessity behind this brand tracking initiative, is that we have no visibility over what our customer base is doing really in the Netherlands, or we don't know where we stand in the market in Germany. We had a pretty good idea in the UK just because we've been there the longest and we're the most established, but really this was the first major foray that we had into the internationalization of our kind of market research efforts, but also really drilling down into where we stood in the marketplace.
Nice. And you started with brand tracking, and we've moved across into product innovation research. Obviously, music to our ears at Appinio, but for the audience today online, as well as the Quirks folk were super interested in this. We'd love to understand kind of the reasons for the change of perception around data internally. I know that was kind of fundamental to kind of maybe proof, kind of brand tracking, perhaps providing the proof, and then really it moving out of just kind of thinking about the tracking of the brand into some other product research.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. The proof of concept was critical. And I remember being quite nervous. Not because we were working with Appinio, not for any other reason other than I had made a big push for this initiative. I had kind of put my head on the proverbial chopping block here, and I needed Mark and I needed Appinio to come through for me and actually deliver a piece of work that was relatable to the business. It can be really difficult when you come in, especially to a growth business, and you've worked in places that have big research budgets that throw a lot of money at these things, and you're asking for a relatively paltry amount by those standards, but an amount that is not insignificant at all to a business like Bulk that's especially bootstrapped. So I remember being quite nervous when I saw the results coming in, and fortunately everything was okay, and the results were really reflective of kind of the understanding that we had, especially in the UK. But that was so important. We had to land that first piece, because otherwise wouldn't have had any credibility moving forward. And I think, it garnered an enormous amount of interest, that initial piece of work, and we did a good job at kind of socializing it in the business. We ran a bunch of workshops. We presented in an all hands meeting about, okay, this is this new, as our CMO called it, the new Ferrari that we have in the garage. And it was really interesting because I had people kind of, we don't have offices, we all sit in one big room, but people basically lining up to say, wow, can you talk me through this part of the research? Or I'd be really curious to learn more about this. It was really funny looking at people's spelling of Appinio when they would send me Slack messages asking me to run through some of the research. But I think that, we had to bust a lot of myths about consumer research as well. And I think there was this thinking that consumer research was somehow super inaccessible and that we'd have to pay hundreds of thousands of pounds to bring people in and run focus groups with them, or we'd have to basically sign away all of the agency to another provider that would basically run their own research on the space or on our customers. And the fact that we had so much agency, so much control over every aspect of the research process, I think was incredibly appealing. And so the next piece of work that we did after this, it kind of came crawling back to Mark saying, please, sir, can I have some more credits? But it was a very simple naming test, I think, something, bringing a new product to market, and we wanted to just test out the names. And one of the great functionalities about Appinio is that you can basically dissect all of the different questions by consumers' answers to other questions. It's basically a big pivot table, and so we were able to drill in super granularly into what our core consumer segments were saying about different types of names, about what they were saying about, how frequently they're going to the gym, stuff like that. And so, again, driving home that proof of concept was so critical, and also displaying really tangible benefit to the business initially. So it went from brand tracking, which is more of a kind of, macro look at where we sit, and really was a baseline for us where we were ushering in a whole host of new exciting developments, and it gave us something to work off of. But then there was this super tangible benefit. A naming test sounds kind of simple, rudimentary, but it was a level of insight that we just hadn't had in the business before, and we had a level of access to that insight through Appinio, through Appinio's panel, through the kind of way that they set up their research, that was incredibly important to us, and has spawned an enormous amount more research, as Mark can attest to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating as well to hear how you went about kind of that internal PR exercise with the data. That's almost been kind of the segue into different forms of research, and now we work as much on kind of product work as we do the brand work. So yeah, really interesting to hear how that happened, and thank you for comparing us to Ferrari as well.
wasn't my words.
Yeah, your bride will follow afterwards. So we've set the macro scene. Let's focus in on dope. It's now your current best-selling pre-workout. Last time I checked, it was 4.4 out of 5 on Amazon, which is obviously indicates huge level of success in terms of people's opinions. Talk us through the role that insights played in achieving that success.
Yeah, I think it's the insights were obviously critical, but I think that dope is representative of a kind of broader shift within the business that is really centered around that consumer centrism. And we talked a little bit about the difference between customer insights, i.e. what they're buying from you, and consumer insights. And there's an enormous amount of gaps between customer insights and consumer insights. If we had tried to develop a new pre-workout product based exclusively on how customers interacted with our existing pre-workout products, then we wouldn't have gotten anywhere at all, because the data would have been too scattered. It would have been too unilluminating, to be perfectly frank. So I talked about a structural shift we underwent a little bit of a business realignment, and the biggest realignment was bringing the product team into the kind of brand and marketing umbrella, and that was kind of emblematic of this broader shift that I've mentioned. And Dope was an inflection point because it was the first time that we really looked at the new product development process end to end from a consumer-centric lens. It used to be that, the product team who have, that massive credit to them and the catalog that they've built at Bulk, but they would formulate a new product. They'd hand it to the brand team who would figure out how to position it. They'd hand it off to the marketing team who would figure out how to market it. They'd hand it off to the e-com team who would merchandise it. And then, you've gone through all of these steps, you put it to the consumer, and either it sells well or it flops or, anywhere in between. And there's no intentionality. And that's an important word, because we were looking to reorient and repoint that entire process and put the consumer right at the beginning. So we started out with a really broad spectrum overview of the entire pre-workout market, put together a long survey trying to figure out who the types of pre-workout consumers were, what kind of things they were looking for in a pre-workout, what they were getting at the moment, where the potential gaps might be. And then we zeroed in much more after that in a separate survey on specific ingredients, specific USPs, how to position this product such that it would appeal to the types of consumers that we wanted this to appeal to. And that kind of reverse engineering of the NPD process, trying to actively meet the needs of consumers rather than just, building a great product that doesn't really appeal to anyone. I like to talk about it as, NPD is not a science experiment. You're not in the lab trying to produce the perfect formulation of whatever the product is. It's a consumer alignment exercise. And that's what Dope really showed the business, is if we can approach new product development from this perspective, with the consumer right in the middle of all of this decision making, then what happened with Dope can start to happen across other verticals, across other products, across other categories. So as Mark mentioned, Dope is our best-selling pre-workout. It's in our top 10 best-selling products across the board, which after only 6 months from launch is a really staggering success. And it has, really positive feedback across the board. Amazon, our own kind of feedback loops. And so, we're delighted, and there's some exciting new stuff to come with Dope that I can't talk about right now. But it's been a really amazing success, and another kind of testament to that consumer centrism and the importance of really putting the customer at the center. So.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating, and I can imagine that even if there was perhaps reluctance internally from product to start with, the concept of being able to design products that already have a level of consumer buy-in must be refreshing from their perspective as well.
Yeah, it de-risks, and it means that you're not kind of you're not white knuckling every single launch that you have, because you kind of know that it's going to work. And obviously it's impossible to go in with 100% certainty to anything, but really having a finger on the pulse means that no one was surprised that Dope was such a roaring success. And it has, as I said, created this really kind of scalable blueprint for how we approach new product development now.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And talk to us about kind of what role agility plays within all of that, because I know you perhaps didn't start off, or maybe didn't partner with Appinio outright because of agility, but it sounds from what you've told us now, and also what you told me previously, that's kind of like it's pivotal that you have a partner that can kind of provide an agile approach as you look to run more and more research.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this earlier, basically being able to control the end-to-end research process. There's a lot of incredible research providers out there that do amazing work. But I think it all comes down to what your needs are as a business and what you need to do with that research. And at Bulk, we need to move fast. We need to move fast because the space is moving at breakneck speed. And if we're not, tapping our consumers, tapping consumers in the marketplace and making sure that we have as much alignment as possible, whether it's, what brand campaigns we're running, what new products we're developing, how we're reformulating existing products, we're just constantly going to be playing catch up. And so the agility piece has allowed us to play offense a little bit, where previously we were playing defense and being super reactive to the movements in the marketplace. This has allowed us to kind of, figure out which way the wind is blowing. And if there is a seed change coming, we're ready to react to it, and we can set in motion, the new product development process, for example. These things take time. And the sooner you can diagnose issues, the sooner you can start to remedy them. And that is what Appinio has allowed us to do. And there are a couple of examples of, and Mark will probably get a chuckle out of this, and Sammy, who's our wonderful research consultant, probably is tearing her hair out somewhere listening to this. But I'll often send over a scatterbrained email that's basically like, please, can you help us with this problem? I'm getting this question from our senior leadership team. I need to figure out a way to go to the market and come up with a level of insight that's going to be satisfactory and actually, strategically inclined. There's no point doing research just to have the research and know what the insight is. You need to actually be able to translate that insight and parlay it into something that's going to be, helpful for the business. And so one example was our kind of New Year's resolutions campaign. So we were a little bit late to the game. It was mid-December, and we were like, oh God, we need to turn something around for our New Year's campaign. And so we ran a piece of research about resolutions that I think from the time that we had the idea to the time that we were huddled around our computer looking at the results of the survey, I think it was about 3.5 or 4 days. And that is a level of speed from ideation to insight that I had never experienced before, and that's down to a host of factors. It's due to how quickly we can access the relevant samples, how quickly I can send out a kind of scatterbrained email and it can turn into a survey that actually is really fit for purpose, and it's brought a level of efficiency that we're absolutely delighted with. And without that agility, again, the defense offense thing, we'd be on the back foot for sure.
Nice. Yeah, we certainly remember that turnaround, especially as we approach the Christmas holidays. Ollie, that one hasn't been forgotten. No, super interesting research. So I guess final question from me is, how do you intend to take this strategy of kind of consumer-led innovation to the next level? What's next for Bulk?
Yeah, so we basically have an entirely new product development pipeline. Some would say, all right, well, you can probably put your feet up now. That's job done. But the sports nutrition industry is really interesting because it's quite top heavy. There's about 10 or so products that people buy at mass scale. Then there's all kinds of stuff that have niche and incredibly engaged audiences, but it's your whey proteins, it's your protein bars, it's your pre-workouts, it's your creatine. There's a lot of products that are the mass market products, and just because something's selling well doesn't necessarily mean that you're positioning it perfectly or that you are targeting the right customers. And so we've taken the learnings from Dope, and we've seen the incredible value that really strong customer alignment can bring. Mm-hmm. And we've said, okay, well, can we be a little bit more introspective about this? Can we look at the things that maybe we think are doing really well or that don't need attention, and start to think, okay, well, a lot of people buy whey protein. Is our whey protein the best possible proposition for the consumer? What does our range architecture look like? How are we positioning certain products relative to other products? What products are people buying in concert? So I'd say that, having previously been very progressive and forward-looking with how we were doing research, and we're still going to be doing a lot of that, trying to play offense and get ahead of what the latest trends are. We're doing some introspection as well, and I think that's a really important next step for the business. Is there are these 10 products that people buy an enormous amount of. Can we make sure that we are as aligned as possible with what consumers want at any given time with those major products, because they're the mass market products for a reason. So I think that's a huge part of what we're doing at the moment. And then, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we have some exciting things in the works with Dope. I can't talk too much about that right now, but we're actually in the field at the moment with a piece of research that supports that kind of Dope extension piece. So that's really, really exciting. And then another thing that we're exploring as a business is it was talked a lot about at Quirks, and it is a fairly buzzy phrase in the industry now, but mental availability. How are we positioning ourselves to maximize mental availability at all of the different consumer touch points across the journey? So it's a really, really exciting time to be working at Bulk, and it's been a really fascinating journey to try and kind of drag consumer insights into the center of the conversation, into the center of the new product development pipeline, and ultimately into the center of the entire commercial function of the business.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And it's been fascinating talking to you today. And at Quirks, mental availability and kind of better brand health tracking is something I think would be a incredibly interesting project for us to work on in the future. I'm just thinking through the category entry points, even as you're mentioning it, and it'd be I think it would add a whole new level of context for the business. So look forward to that, Ollie. I think kind of final thought for myself is just by staying agile, building that bank of credibility for the data internally that you can kind of transact against, applying the approach to a high importance project, I think has played a part here as well in ensuring that kind of the blueprint for insight-led success is repeated. You've kind of changed the way consumer data is seen across the business, which I think within the space of 2 years is incredible, and it's brilliant to be kind of a supplier to that and a witness to that as well. So incredible to hear the story and to also see such tangible success. I think that's going to be really interesting for our audience today. Is this is putting consumers center of the conversation is one thing, but being able to show a product that is a top 10 bestseller in a huge business like yours and your number one pre-workout, I think is kind of, I guess, the ROI, right? You've shown that it works.
And that's it's such an important point, because you're in the business to ultimately make money, and being able to have research that supports that commercial function. As I said, it's all well and good producing the best formulation of pre-workout or of whey protein, but it has to make you money. And the main way to do that is by aligning it to as many customers as possible, and trying to really hone in on that alignment has been a massive transformation for our business. But that commercial success has to follow, and we've been lucky enough that has been the journey. So excited to continue working with you, Mark, and excited for what's next at Bulk.
Thanks so much for the partnership and the time, Ollie, both at Quirks last week and today on the call. As I said, always brilliant working with you. So thank you.
Fab. Thanks, Mark.